Numbers 16, it's about where we are, about what we were ready for on Wednesday when we finished up. We've noticed already, if we were to give the book of Numbers a theme, amongst other things, what is one of the main themes throughout the book of Numbers? Anyone remember? Rebellion. Willful rebellion. That's unfortunately going to continue as we go forward, and we're going to see that this morning as we dig into chapter 16. So looking at question 4 there in your material, I asked there Korah and company, who we have here introduced to us. They come before Moses and Aaron, and they lay what charges. We might phrase that in a different way. You kind of run out of ways to say grumbling and complaining, so this is just another way to say that. But what do they lay at the feet of Moses and Aaron? What do you have for that?
They said he put himself above the Lord, and they were upset for him leading them in the wilderness.
Yeah, you have. That's kind of the end of the argument, right? Is that you have elevated yourself above, or Moses and Aaron rather have elevated themselves above the rest of the assembly. Do you remember what he says about the assembly specifically, even before this?
They're all holy.
They are all holy. Is that true, by the way? Is the whole congregation holy? Sure. They're supposed to be, anyway, set apart, consecrated, devoted to God.
And Moses actually said he wished they were.
Right. Yeah, earlier in the text even, Moses said, I wish that everyone in Israel had this sort of spirit, and that was prophesying. That's a good foreshadowing of the events that we see here. You notice also that he says, you have gone too far. Keep that phrase in mind as well. We're going to circle back to that. But all the congregation is holy. The Lord is among them. Also true. This is a familiar charge. Talking about specifically, the last one, why have Moses and Aaron elevated themselves above the rest of the assembly? This is a similar charge, if you remember, that Aaron himself and Miriam had brought before Moses, asking why Moses had elevated himself, or why should only Moses come to God in this way and have this position? Do you remember who, and we get it in the text here, Korah was a son of who? Son of Izar, the son of Levi, one of the Kohathites. Who was, or what were the Kohathites responsible for within the responsibilities of the tribe of Levi? If I can phrase it that way. What were they responsible for specifically? So they carried what items as it pertained to the tabernacle? The furnishings, the holy things, all the way up to the Ark of the Covenant. They were responsible for those things in certain ways. When Korah comes here, and by the way, we have Dathan and Abiram mentioned here also. They were the sons of Reuben, so we have two different tribes, and I'll come back to that point also, which is interesting. The Waldrons make a comment on that. But we have specifically Korah, who seems to be kind of the ringleader here, has such a low view of the service that he has been charged with, which is a great privilege to be able to do these things. And yet he says, no, that's not enough for me. I want to elevate myself to the high priest, or to elevate myself to the role of prophet, as Moses is, or the mediator of the covenant. And I think one thing that we can see here as to why this is such a significant event and why the punishment is going to be so severe. Korah is coming against the one who is the high priest, who makes atonement for the people that we've talked about already back in Leviticus 16. He's coming against the prophet, the Lord's chosen prophet. He's coming against the mediator of this covenant. All of these things, and we might even say, I think if you look forward to Deuteronomy 33, for instance, Moses is a type of king even. Korah and the rabble here are all undermining those foreshadowings that are pointing to the Messiah. They are failing miserably in that. They're rejecting the type or the shadow of what's to come. So I think it's significant for us to notice that when Korah and ones like Korah challenge that vision, challenge those prophecies and those types, there are going to be severe consequences, as we're going to see with Korah and company here. Anything else on that question and just what they level against Moses and Aaron?
Just one little point that we learned earlier, that the text tells us Moses was the meekest man in all the earth.
Yes.
It doesn't really matter sometimes, how good a fella he is. He's going to have critics. And in this case, that was certainly true. Moses hadn't brought this on himself. This was something that came from the critic and not the object.
Right, exactly. They were projecting quite a bit onto Moses and onto Aaron. That's true. Anything else there? All right, well, question number 5 then, marching along in the text. As Moses hears what Korah and Dathan and Abiram and the rest have to say, what is his response? Let's start there. So what is Moses' response to the charge?
Tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy.
Yes. That's kind of the climax of this whole thing. This is going to be how God distinguishes between who is his, or more specifically of who is holy and who is not. I think that's true. Yes, sir. I see another hand, or hear another comment. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He fell on his face,
Mm-hmm.
and then he went and talked to him.
Yes. He shows great humility there at the beginning. And then, yes, he goes and he approaches the one who has brought this charge. This is what I was wanting to contrast just a moment ago, or what I mentioned in contrasting. Korah and the assembly, they had already said, "You have gone too far." That's what they give to Moses and to Aaron. Verse 7, as Moses tells them this process of how the Lord is going to distinguish between one or the other, of who is chosen and who is not, the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi. So they have said, Moses, Aaron, you've gone too far in what you've done. And Moses says, no. You have gone, and Moses is not saying here, you've gone against me, I think is the main charge. The main charge is you have gone against God's leadership, God's appointed leadership that he's already set up. And also, verse 9, let's notice this. We'll come back to this again in just a moment. He says, this is Moses, is it too small a thing for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do service in the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them, and that he has brought you near him, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you? And would you seek the priesthood also? Therefore it is, and this is what I'm getting at, therefore it is against the Lord that you and all your company have gathered together. What is Aaron that you grumble against him? So Moses gets to the heart of the matter. They think that their grudge and their beef is with Moses and Aaron, but Moses cuts through all the smoke and says, no, you have rebelled against the Lord. You have put yourself in direct contrast to the Lord. And again, Moses is recognizing you have such a low view of your work. And that there is just so much wrong with that picture. The second part of this question that I gave for you, what does this teach us further about the concept of holiness? Holiness is, of course, something we've talked about in great detail already throughout the book of Leviticus, but that continues on in the narrative here. So what are some things that maybe we notice about God's concept, particularly of holiness, and then maybe contrasting that with Korah's? Yes, sir.
Defined by God.
Yeah, right. And that's we can kick it off there. So Korah and his company, that's where they started, is we get to define what holiness is. The whole congregation is holy, and therefore anyone can kind of rise to the occasion of the same role that you and Aaron have, Moses. But as Brother Barry pointed out, God defines, he designates what is holy. They thought that in many ways holiness was about status, it was about position, it was about who had the best job in their view. But as we've already noticed with Moses even, Moses is the meekest man to walk the earth. He falls down on his face, he approaches Korah himself in that way. They challenge leadership, whereas God says you need to submit to what I have revealed. So there's a lot of different ways that man might think, well, this is what holiness is. But if it's anything less than what God has defined, then it's not true holiness. And that's certainly it's a simple point, but again, a point I think that's worth making. Anything else there on Moses' response to Korah specifically? Yes.
Just to maybe an application, this is not going out of style, and there's still people who say, well, I don't know why women can't be witches. I mean, just one example of many. Well, it seems to me like this is just as good as that. So this is not a new problem, but the answer's always been the same. You point out, holiness involves separation, and God's the one who does the separating, and he's the one that does the designating.
Right.
If we're not willing to put up with that, we know how he feels about it. From this, he may not open the ground up for us, but we know how he feels about that.
That's right. And one other thing I didn't really mention, but there are also, I don't know any other way to say it, but levels of holiness, if I can put it in that way. So the whole congregation is holy, but there are these, so you have the Levites, and then from there you have these other clans within that, and then you have Aaron and his sons. They have specific roles, and you have Aaron himself. So there's all these different aspects of holiness. And so bringing that to the church today, there are all these different roles that we are to be fitted into, and it's not a matter of this, this role over here is so much more of a status position than another. It is all important work. And we need to view it as such, not have a low view of those things, and be thankful for the work that we have been given to do for God, because it is God ordained. I think that's a great point. Anything else there? All right, well then let's get to verses 12 through 14. So evidently, during the course of Moses approaching Korah, sometime during that, Dathan and Abiram have gone off. They've left the scene. Moses sends after them. And what is their response to Moses? What do they say?
We're not going to come.
We will not come up.
Take us
I tell you, I, when I read this, I had to read it again when I was going back over the material, or even just preparing for the material. This is such a slap in the face, not just to Moses, but most specifically to God, where they are equivocating Egypt as the land flowing with milk and honey. And they are saying the land of promise, Canaan, is actually the land of bondage and slavery and death. What a messed up picture. And I cannot imagine, Moses, when he hears that, just jaw on the floor. What in the world are you thinking? How have they gotten such a messed up picture of things? They say, have you made yourself a prince over us? Giving that to Moses. Almost like, I don't know if this was their intention. It's already brazen language. Maybe they're even kind of making a jab at Moses of his days back when he was in Egypt, when he was a prince of Egypt. I'm not sure. But in actuality, God had made Moses a type of prince, a prophet, a king, in certain ways. One that would point to the prince. And they're saying all of that is wrong, and it needs to be upheaved, needs to be changed. They go on to say, as has already been noted, that Moses, and if it's Moses, then it's also God, failed in bringing them into the promised land. It is an absolute refusal of what has already transpired in Numbers 13. That is why they're not able to enter into the promised land. Why they're not going into the land flowing with milk and honey, specifically that generation. But they dig in and they bring this against Moses. And Moses becomes very angry. And what does Moses say in the text?
I'm not guilty of anything for these people. I'm dead.
Yeah. Reminds us a lot of Samuel towards the end of his life when we get to 1 Samuel. And he's talking with the people where he says, I think this is 12 and verse 3, whose ox or donkey have I taken? If I have, then I will pay it back in full. But Moses is saying, first of all, he says to God, he goes to the Lord and he says, do not accept, do not respect any of their offerings. And then he levels that by saying, this has already been mentioned, I have not even taken one donkey from them, not even a beast of burden, an unclean animal I have not taken from them. I have not abused my position in any sort of way. And so we might use the phrase, search my heart, test my heart, and make sure that's not the case. And I don't think he is saying, I think he's recognizing innocence there. He's not seized animals, he's not seized property, he's not even taken one of the smallest or common animals from the people. Yes, sir.
Just a quick point, and to that point, isn't that extraordinary? I mean, how many people could have that much power in their hand or that much prominence in their hand and not give in to the temptation of self-interest?
Mm-hmm.
That's an extraordinary statement to
Yeah.
make when you think about it.
And I guess that goes back to the description of Moses. He was the meekest man who walked the earth. So power under control is how we often describe that, and that's certainly the case when we see that, or this phrase from Moses. But I cannot imagine a more brazen thing to say against Moses and God, to say, Egypt, that was far better, that was the land of promise, and you have failed in bringing us into the promised land. It's just, talk about rewriting history. That is one of the worst jobs of that, or I guess best jobs if we're rewriting history. They did a pretty good job with that in their minds. But from there, well, anything else there on Dathan and Abiram, I should say. Yes, sir.
I think we can apply that today to people's rejection of truth today. I mean, they're rejecting the truth. The obvious truth is one of them. they reject it. We got people today that, you know, we've got dozens of genders and counting supposedly, and they're rejecting the obvious truth, all kinds of stuff that people reject. When you reject,
Yeah.
for whatever reason you reject the truth, when you reject the truth, no truth becomes your truth. I mean,
Yeah.
anything goes.
That's right. And yeah, it occurred to me, I said earlier they had such a low view of their duties and their position. That it really goes back further than that, and that gets to what you're saying, is it starts with a low view of God. That's where it starts. They thought that what God had given was incorrect, it was wrong, it needed to be adjusted, whatever it was. And so, yeah, then they could bend the rules however they wanted to. But as the people are going to see, as they're going to see, that's just not going to fly. That's not how things work. Yes, sir.
I mean, I've always thought it's also thinking about just the influence that Korah, Dathan, and Abiram had on those 250 people that they got to rise up with him.
Yes.
I mean,
Right.
what were they thinking also? You know, I mean, so that just goes back. Even these people with these twisted ideas going against God, they can influence other people that will not follow God, but follow with Him. To their demise.
Right. Yes. I'll go ahead and mention this. The Waldrons talk about how, the Kohathites and the camp of Reuben, they were sort of in the same encampment or on the same side of the tabernacle in that same encampment, but they were not to be this close in their encampment to one another. So it seems what you're talking about, you got those 250 men, where Korah is he's kind of butting up against, these other individuals, where it seems maybe he has one complaint against Moses, some of the others have a complaint against Aaron, and he's kind of taking their complaints and coercing that into this full rebellion. Yeah, exactly. That seems to be some of the case here. So it just, it goes back maybe even further than what we see in the text, perhaps. Very good. Anything else there? All right. Well, question 7, and this is kind of a loaded question. May require several things to be said here. But what transpires in the story, 15 onward in chapter 16, what transpires in the story that highlights the theme of separateness? So this is, again, something we've highlighted throughout, but what again happens here? So maybe we can start here. What does Moses' first command, I guess even backing up from there, the Lord first tells Moses and Aaron to do what? Get away from the entire congregation. And then there's another intercession where then God tells Moses to tell the congregation what? Yeah, you separate from these specific individuals, from Korah, from Dathan, from Abiram, from their encampment, from their tents. And then from there, how is God going to demonstrate that there is a distinguishing factor here between these people?
The ground is going to swallow up those men that were coming against them. Fire's going to come down to the other 250.
Right, and we're not even, I think, it says something along the lines of the Lord will create something new if they are indeed in rebellion, and if not, then the opposite. But even before that, what does he tell Korah and his company, the 250 elders, and Aaron specifically to do? Yes?
Bring their censers with incense on before the tent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you have this large mass of people, and then you have Aaron. You have the chosen leader. I would imagine, just kind of trying to imagine that in my head, that would be an incredibly, in some ways, I suppose, intimidating picture. But Aaron knew, well, this is what the Lord has given, and I'm sure that there would have been a lot of confidence in that as well. But what a picture. Doesn't this remind you a lot of in Elijah's day, in the divided kingdom, where Elijah is against all of those prophets of Baal, and in similar fashion, we'll see whose God wins the day. Now Korah and his company think that the God is on their side, but we've already talked about they have a different picture of God than who God truly is. So Korah and his company, they take their censers, and the text even words it, Korah assembled all the congregation against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So again, we have this picture of antagonism and rebellion. As it happens, as we've noted already, the glory of the Lord appears. It's not a good thing for certain individuals. Verses 20 and 24, let's note here, the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, "Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment," he says, verse 24. Say to the congregation, get away from the dwelling of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. So we have that separation again, but Moses says again in verse 28, hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, and that it has not been of my own accord. So separation, and whatever happens from here, you can know that this is from the Lord. This has not been just me trying to elevate myself. This is God ordained. So then, as has already been mentioned, the Lord causes this new thing to happen where the ground opens up, swallows the rebellious people, and as has also been mentioned, he further consumes those 250 elders with fire. This is that note from the Waldrons. I'll go ahead and read in more detail that I mentioned earlier. They say, under ordinary circumstances, Korah would not have been living next door to Dathan and Abiram, Reubenites, whereas Korah was a Levite of the family of the Kohathites. Both the tribe of Reuben and the Kohathites encamped on the south side of the tabernacle, but the Levites had their own encampment separate from Reuben. So Korah appears to have moved his tent near the tents of his confederates. I like the way that was put. Also, no family is mentioned in connection with Korah. And this is an interesting thing in the text. So no families mentioned in connection with Korah. Only with Dathan and Abiram are families, that is, wives and children, are mentioned. We learn later that the sons of Korah did not die with their father. So with Korah, it was the men who followed him, whether his servants or adherents, who died. So as mentioned earlier, Korah, it seems, was kind of, to use the phrase, stirring the pot there. Does anyone remember the significance of the sons of Korah later on in the history of Israel? What were they instrumental in writing some books? Some of the Psalms we have, the sons of Korah. Korah's descendants, that is what seems to be inferred there from the text, those that did not participate in the rebellion. They would later become temple singers, poets, leaders in worship, the very thing that Korah failed to do here. He could have been a great leader within his own clan, within his own tribe, and instead he became a leader towards rebellion. So I think that is an interesting distinction that we see later on in the history. Anything there anything else there with what transpires in the story. Yes, sir.
I'll throw out just, you look at the chain of events that led to this. You know, they have just been ousted from the land of Canaan. They wanted to go in, can't go in now. God's rule is that you're going to go to the wilderness. Now you're doing something you don't want to do, and that is you're going to go out to the desert, wander until you die.
Yeah.
And that's where it tests their respect of authority of Moses. It tests the respect of the authority of God. And that's where obedience is tested, is when you're going to have to do something you don't want to do. And that's where this all just comes to a head. You know, they're pointing fingers at Moses. They're pointing fingers at his authority. He's made himself our leader.
Yeah.
They've taken us out of the land of promise. You know, all these different reasons are all bubbling up to the surface, but they're just, you can tell where they're talking. You can hear the gossip behind the scenes where they're stirring this up. And this is just fast forwarding these guys who are going to die in the wilderness anyway because of their rebellion to begin with.
Yeah, it's almost a kind of a recognition of they know the consequences, and there's nothing they can do to change those consequences. It seems they were angry, antagonistic towards those things in many ways, towards Moses, the one who gave them what that punishment would be. But I think it is what you were saying occurred to me also. Could that first generation could they have turned things around and still been faithful to the Lord? They absolutely could have. I think they still would have suffered the consequences of their prior rebellion, but they could have continued to prepare that next generation that would enter the land. And how much more impactful would that have been? We can only just imagine. Because in so many ways, this first generation was just bent on rebellion and just digging in.
I mean, you brought up the sons of Korah. I mean, if they were under the age of 20 or 19, I forget which the number is. I mean, they're amongst that generation that learned to fear the Lord.
Yes.
And I mean, they saw their father or their grandfather
Yeah.
get swallowed up.
How impactful would that have been? Absolutely. It had the right impact, it seems, for them. Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir.
It's hard to believe. These are the same people not 2 years earlier were crying out to the Lord for relief from Egypt. Nobody drugged them out there kicking and screaming.
Right.
They left with all kinds of wealth, and they were glad to go. Now they're grumbling, and we're going to see this same cycle over and over.
Yeah.
But I'm just shocked at thinking these people were so oppressed, they were crying out to God for relief, and now here we are.
Yeah.
Just one more quick note
Yes, sir.
if I may,
Yeah.
To that point, we talk about here how offensive it is to God to call slavery the land of milk and honey. Canaan is, in a sense, a type of heaven. I think the Hebrew writer used it that way. I think when people think about this earth, when they think about sin, and they talk about that being heaven, it's the exact same offense, is it not? This is not heaven.
Yeah.
We're headed for Canaan.
Yeah.
And when we forget this world's not our home, that's the same sin.
Yeah. That's a great point. Someone made a comment at one point, not here, this has been several years ago, where I was trying to make a similar point about Canaan being a type or a shadow of heaven, of that's our promised land. We'll even make that point a little later on in some of the material. But someone made the comment, they said, I don't want to view heaven as Canaan because it was full of evil people, and it was filled with strife, and it was filled with rebellion and all these things. But it occurred to me that that's not what it was intended to be, was it? The people made it that. God promised that this, and we've already talked about this back when the spies first spied out the land, it was always meant to be a flourishing land and a land of blessing. But if they forgot God, then that's when things change. So I think that, yeah, all of that I appreciate so much. Good points. All right, anything else there on question 7 then? All right, getting into question 8 then. Got a little under 10 minutes here. The people respond to God's judgment by complaining again. What a response to all that's happened here in the story. So the Lord then sends a plague, another plague, amongst the people. In the verses that I've provided there, how is the plague then stopped? How is it stopped in the end? Maybe we should first back up and notice, how is it first? There was an attempt to stop it before 46 and 50, and who tried to intercede? As we've seen already, time and again, Moses and Aaron. But in this particular instance, the Lord does not listen to their pleas. The plague ensues. And just, you think about the fact that the Lord has threatened annihilation several times prior to this point. This is the first time that it seems he is beginning that process fully, where the plague is in full throttle. He is actually going forward in that process now. So, then, how is the plague stopped after this?
He stood between the people, well, that started,
Mm-hmm.
and the ones that had the plague, he stood between the people and the plague and made atonement for them.
And who stood?
Aaron.
Aaron, yes. Yeah, Aaron takes incense, stands between the dead and the living. Does that strike an image of anything that maybe we should be thinking about today? Someone that stands between the dead and the living? That Aaron is a type of Christ. I think that is a clear picture here. He not only intercedes for the people, but of course Christ makes perfect intercession. God does hear that intercession. He makes atonement for his people, as we've already talked about, grants life, and Christ does, literally stands between death and life, holding back death and breaking the chains of death so that his people may have life. I think there's just so many ways that you can see Jesus in this particular instance. Anything else on that point? That's just a quick point I wanted to make. Yes, sir.
I think you see that God wants to be merciful.
Yeah.
He's got to be righteous. His judgment, he wants to extend mercy.
Yeah.
He provides a way by having an intercessor
Yeah.
that is worthy to do that.
Right.
It's just said in Christ.
Yes, that's right. Yes, sir.
I don't know if anyone we all seen on social medias where lately a lot of people try and paint God as this villainous destroyer, and they say, well, all God did in the Old Testament was just destroy things and destroy people, but everyone seems to forget that God has always been merciful. He has always given everyone chances.
Yeah.
And when it comes time for the consequences, everyone wants to forget that, well, I gave you a chance.
Mhm.
And when we look at the things today, we still have those chances, but we still continue to do the things that we want. We're always met with those consequences, just like here.
Yeah. People make the complaint about, well, why would God condemn so many people to hell for their choices and so forth? The fact that we're standing and breathing today is God's mercy. That's his grace. And yeah, he could just completely wipe us all out, but he has chosen not to. Yes. Yeah.
Just how good it is for them, the people, to be able to see that this is the man that they were rebelling against. Now, coming up there, making intercession and stopping
Yeah.
the Lord from going further with this judgment. I would have taken the long way around. Aaron, I mean, it just,
Yeah.
that's an effective way for them to see not just Aaron as a boss, but his role that God has chosen him to be.
Yeah. there is no antagonism we see from Aaron there. He doesn't take pleasure in these people dying. Moses does not either. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Did I see another hand? All right. Yeah, great. Appreciate all the good comments. Well, we have just a few minutes here, and we'll see if we can do justice to this next question. So this is chapter 17 then. To put kind of this final stamp on who is the leader of God's people. What is the end result of God's process to determine proper leadership among his people? So maybe let's start with what is that process? What does God lay out for the people to do?
To take a rod from the head of each family clan, whatever, and Aaron's rod, and put it in the tabernacle, and the Lord will pass by it, and the one that he chooses above.
Yes. Each man's name written on one of the 12 staves, according to the chief of their father's house among their tribes. And so, what is the final result? Whose rod does bud in the end? Aaron's rod, yeah. Who else could it be at the end of this process? It is only Aaron's rod and no one else's. There is one note the Waldrons make, which I thought was worth bringing up. In Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 4, we get an indication that the rod is actually placed within the ark itself, but here in the text, it seems maybe more so just next to it, within the tabernacle. And I don't think that's necessarily a contradiction. I think that's just more information that we get there. But this does seal all of this. Aaron as God's chosen high priest. And one thing that we can't necessarily prove it going forward, but I think there are some clues in the text that tell us maybe this is the rod that has been used leading up to events here. This is the rod that Moses is going to use pretty soon here to strike the rock again. All of these things, it's just interesting the history of this particular object, but not that the power is in the object itself, but God is using it to teach certain lessons. And so I think that's why it was given prominence to be housed in the tabernacle and later on the temple as the history moves forward. Anything else there on chapter 17? All right, well, there are lessons 16 and 17 in the back, but go ahead and prepare for lesson 14. If you don't have lesson 14 and 15, please get with me. I'll get you a copy of those. Be happy to do that. But go ahead and prepare for lesson 14 for Wednesday. Thank you.